In the last video, we talked about pacing and corresponding heart rates and training for those specific needs in the middle distance strokes like the 200 and the 500. We're going to talk a little bit about the 200 IM and the 400 IM because that is, there's some similarities, but there's also some differences in how you swim those events. Just some background on those. First off, you must train all four strokes. It's vital that you are training all four strokes, and particularly my own philosophy is you need to train your weakest stroke the most. Just my own philosophy, breaststroke is the longest part of the event, and so I think it's wise to spend a little bit more time on breaststroke. But not only do you have to train all four strokes, you need to train all the levels of the strokes. You need to train at 150 heart rate, 160 heart rate, and we'll explain why. And then you need to understand that there's transitions not only in speed and effort, but there's transitions during the stroke itself. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about that. Just in a real general view, let's say this is a muscle group. Let's say it's your triceps. Doesn't matter. You've got oxygen coming, you have capillaries that diffuse throughout the muscle, and then it's removed on the waist side, and it's recycled and oxygenated again back in the lungs. At a very small level, here's the same thing. You've got blood coming to the muscle fibers, and you've got capillaries and arteries that's supplying to the muscles, and these muscles will then work based on the effort level and the needs of what you're swimming. But something that also happens is in these capillaries, you have little muscles around these capillaries and around arteries as it's delivering. As you change strokes, you're changing how this muscle group might be using. You still might use this specific muscle, but the muscle fibers are going to change on how you're going to be using them, and you might change the number of muscle fibers, you might increase the muscle fibers, you might increase the direction that they're used, but it's different. And what your body does is it will shunt blood away from the muscle fibers that are now not being used to the muscle fibers that are being used at a greater effort. So like if you're changing from butterfly to backstroke, the muscle fibers that you'll be using might all change to a different set and a different way. And blood shunts, let's say this is an open artery or capillary and it's carrying blood, these muscles will kind of like shut down and shunt the blood from the muscles that you're no longer using to the muscles that you are using. So you got to keep that in mind. This process takes, in individuals that are in very good shape, about 4 seconds, but generally it takes about 6 seconds for a person to change the shunting of this blood. Now, how does that apply to our IMs? In the 200 IM, if we're just looking at the top part here, fly, back, breast free, you notice that the graph is very similar to like our 200s of stroke. The difference, though, is that in the first part, when you're building to that first transition, you do accelerate, but you do want to try to keep your butterfly just as smooth and as easy and as controlled as possible. Just pretty much like as you would in a 200 of stroke or 200 free, and it doesn't really matter the stroke. Instead of accelerating at that point, you're actually going to make your transition, and you're actually going to back off a little bit on your effort. You're going to bring this back down maybe to like 150, 160 heart rate. You're going to allow the blood to shunt and to change and start flowing to the muscles that you're starting to use on backstroke. And then at that point, you're going to go through another acceleration, and you're going to try to go to a little bit higher heart rate, probably maybe finishing around 160. So you might be about 150 heart rate here, maybe about 160 at the end of the backstroke. So you're still not sprinting, you're still not going really hard, but you have to be as fast as you possibly can, training at that 160 heart rate so that when you get into your backstroke event, you can be fast with the corresponding heart rate. So a lot of your butterfly could be training at 150, 160 heart rate. Your backstroke, you're probably going to have to be a little bit higher heart rate for the majority of your training. So you get into breaststroke, same thing. It's a little bit easier because of the underwater sequence. You're spending some time underwater. You're pulling down, you're coming up. Your body kind of automatically starts shunting blood a different way. Maybe 1 or 2 strokes easy, and then you begin to accelerate, and you might finish your breaststroke around 170, 180 heart rate. And it's okay. You can go pretty hard on the breaststroke. And if you're a good breaststroker, because the time frame in the breaststroke is longer, if you're a good breaststroker, you really have an advantage because that's going to be a bigger part of your race. As you finish the breaststroke, you're going to be hopefully about at threshold. When you push off, if you do have a good strong dolphin kick on your freestyle, that's when you really want to use it. You can push off, make a few strokes, easy. Try to make your transition with the shunting of the blood for about 4 to 5, 6 seconds. So after about maybe 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards, depending on your level, then you can go into your final sprint phase. But you notice that after each stroke, there's a little bit of dip before you start to accelerate, and that allows this blood to change. The blood flow to change and to start delivering oxygen to the muscles that you're using. If you try to jump on it too quick, if you're jumping on it and you are even going too hard for that 5, 6 seconds, you're anaerobic. And during that time, you will produce more lactate, and you will have to buffer that and remove it, which takes effort. And then also because of lactate and all the processes that goes on, if you get your lactate levels up, it is going to affect your performance. So in the 400 IMs, pretty much the same thing that could apply. You want to make that first 100 butterfly, really you want to make it really smooth and build the entire 100, and you want to try not to finish above 140, 150, 160 heart rate. And that's hard to do. Most people tend to want to try to go pretty, you got to be in shape for butterfly. Backstroke, same thing, make your adjustment, allow the blood to shunt, allow the blood flow to change, begin to accelerate. And so you might be from 150 to 160 on your backstroke. Breaststroke again, same thing. As you change strokes, allow the blood to shunt and change. And then, instead of just using the 50 to accelerate, you're using the whole 100 to accelerate up to threshold, to finish at threshold, and then to make your final effort going into the freestyle. So if you are going to be an IMer, really you're looking at a lot of training because you have to train all 4 strokes. You have to, you see that you've got to be able to swim different strokes at different speeds, at different effort levels, and still have the ability to have the sprint phase at the end. And then the bigger mix, you have to also deal with the shunting of blood and the shifting of blood. The better shape you are, the faster this occurs, the more you can tolerate it, and that's an advantage if you can switch speeds. So hopefully that helps your IM and the training for the IM and why you have to do what you do.